Well, tennis friends, it has been quite some time since we last spoke. To give you a reminder of where we were last time we did a show here at Coffee Break Tennis Studios, the world had just discovered that Grigor Dimitrov, Novak Djokovic, and other players who were part of the Adria Tour fiasco had tested positive for COVID-19, and I was dangerously running low on hand sanitizer. But since then, a lot has changed. For one, you can get a variety of hand sanitizers from all over the place. Take it from me. Sure, you may go into a store, buy a brand of hand sanitizer, and then realize that after it's gone, they never come back. But a new competitor will pop up with their sanitizer, whether it be small, large, or this kind, made from hemp, or this kind, which is green. This kind looks like spray-on sunscreen. And things have changed for Novak Djokovic and Grigor Dimitrov. Djokovic has been seen on the practice court. He was on clay for a while, but now suspiciously we see him on hard courts. And of course, Grigor Dimitrov has been part of Patrick Mouratoglou's Ultimate Tennis Showdown. And like the many brands of hand sanitizer, we've seen quite a variety of tennis exhibitions. You know, from UTS Ultimate Tennis Showdown to the thing I went to with John Isner and Stevie Johnson in Atlanta. There was a Czech women's only exhibition thing going on at one point. We've seen all kinds of stuff. But, like the experts will tell you, hand sanitizer is never a true substitute. It can never replace good old-fashioned washing your hands with soap and water. And these exhibition tennis tournaments, as welcome as they are in times of a global pandemic, can never replace the feeling of watching real tennis like at a grand slam such as the US Open. But regardless of how good the tennis could have been in some of these exhibitions from the last couple of months, they're never really going to excite the tennis fan like a real tennis tournament where they have something on the line. We like to see players play for something real, whether that be money, rankings points, and especially Grand Slam titles. That's number one. That's why we as tennis fans love the GOAT debate more than anything. That's why we love to see how many slams Serena Williams is going to finish with, because playing for history, that sounds even better than playing for $1 million. Playing for history has a whole lot more riding on it. And despite being led to believe that Nadal and Djokovic were probably going to skip anything in the U.S., not deal with the headache, and just focus on the clay court season, well, today's big piece of breaking news, that may change the course of tennis history. Today on Coffee Break Tennis, we will discuss the implications of the cancellation of the Masters 1000 clay court tournament in Madrid, Spain. How does this change things? We'll talk all about that. Plus, Nick Kyrgios says he is not going to play the US Open, and he makes sure to do his best to insult every other tennis player he can think of while he's at it. Also, what is the safer bet? Going to the US or staying in Europe? When you're Djokovic or Nadal, you are playing for the history. You want to beat Roger Federer's all-time slam record. What is the smarter play? Andy Murray has a little bit to say on that, describing it as a very fluid situation. But hey, things are always here fluid at the fastest growing tennis talk show in the world. Maybe we've taken a little bit of a break with no tennis happening in the world, but tennis is back, and so we are back. Welcome to Coffee Break Tennis. I am your host, Matt Bradshaw. I am so happy that you are here today, despite all the bad stuff, crazy stuff going on in the world. Not a lot to be too excited about the last month or so, but I'm pretty optimistic. I am hopeful that we will finally see what matters most in tennis: Grand Slam tennis. There wouldn't be a Coffee Break Tennis if all we had were exhibitions. Wouldn't be that fun to talk about. But I do think we'll have the US Open, and I think so because of the NBA. If you haven't noticed, if you haven't watched any sports, Major League Baseball has been a bit of a disaster. A lot of people think Major League Baseball is not going to make it. They're going to have to cancel their season pretty quickly. I guess the Miami Marlins are pretty much already canceled for the whole season, so we'll see what happens with that. And the NBA, that's the thing about baseball. They're traveling all over the place, but the NBA is doing the bubble system, which seems to be working pretty well. And the U.S. Open, of course, is going to do. Some people say it's not going to be as strict, which is going to lead to huge problems potentially. But I think if the U.S. Open is watching if they're watching the NBA closely, and I'm sure they are, if you're in charge of the U.S. Open, you got to be. I'm sure they're feeling pretty optimistic about their chances to succeed with the bubble system. If they have everyone stuck in New York, they should be able to handle things. So I think it's going to happen. But what is definitely not going to happen is the Madrid Open in España. Reports from tennis.com, September's, I guess it's still not 100% official, but everyone knows it's supposedly tomorrow they'll officially announce it is canceled. But we all knew. In fact, let me go back to a story that's a little older, just to let you know how things can move so quickly. It's very fluid, as Andy Murray said. Rome, Madrid to adjust plans following warnings from local authorities. The Rome and Madrid Masters are both, this is from tennis.com, did I already say that? The Rome and Madrid Masters are both adjusting their plans following tightened instructions from local authorities. I think we talked about this back in March. It doesn't matter what the Miami Open says. It says, hey, we're still going to have the tennis no matter what. Well, if the local authorities step in and tell you, no, you're not, well, you are not going to have your tournament. So the local authorities have stepped in and said the Italian Tennis Federation has been told by Rome's Scientific Advisory Committee not to allow fans because of the safety concerns involved, according to the Italian press. However, the tournament had previously announced plans to have around 17,000 spectators for the one-week ATP WTA competition. The federation still has permission to hold the event at the Foro Italico. The Madrid Masters, though, could be canceled altogether. According to El Confidencial, the local Madrid council has sent a communication to the organizers saying that it is inadvisable for the tournament to be played given the health risks involved for the public, organization, and players. Fast forward to today. Report September, this is also tennis.com, Madrid Open to be canceled due to COVID-19. You see canceled, you already know the other C word is coming soon. You don't even have to finish reading the sentence. Various reports, including those from España Media, indicate that the Madrid Open, scheduled to begin directly after the U.S. Open on September 13th, that is the day of the final, I believe, at the U.S. Open, will be canceled due to a rise in coronavirus cases. There have been rumors about the tournament's viability over the past week, and on Saturday, the tournament released an official statement on the matter, saying, quote, in the last meeting on July 29th, due to the increase in cases of COVID-19 in Madrid in recent days, the organizers of the Madrid Open stated their concerns about being able to stage the tournament free from health complications that might affect the players. Blah, 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 blah. Bottom line is, it's going to be canceled tomorrow. So many people, including myself, have been saying, going back a month or so, that there's no way Djokovic and Nadal will play simply because of the scheduling. Forget about whether or not there's some kind of self-quarantine order about when you leave the U.S. and come back to Europe and you got to hide somewhere for a couple of weeks to self-quarantine. Forget about that. Just the fact that this is how top players operate. They do not schedule tournaments on different surfaces, especially like back-to-back-to-back like that. You don't play 2 weeks at a best-of-5 sets major and then roll in the very next day to a Masters 1000 right before you roll into another and then go to another major. That's crazy. That would never happen. So with Madrid being canceled, now we have a little room for an argument to say, well, you could play the U.S. Open, and then you could have a whole week off, and then you could play Rome. Maybe don't care so much about your result there. Just play real matches on clay. And then hopefully you lose maybe a little early at Rome, and then you have some more time to get ready for the French Open after you get a couple matches under your belt. So that is a real possibility. But there's even more evidence. We'll get to Andy Murray, and that's really the bottom line here about what's going to happen with playing hard courts in the U.S. versus playing clay in Europe. But let's take a listen to this. I thought this was pretty interesting. This is from Australia Sports, Yahoo Sports in Australia. Cunning Novak Djokovic request signals U.S. Open intent. His cunning request. What is Novak Djokovic's cunning request? Novak Djokovic practiced on clay during the coronavirus pandemic lockdown. He's been filmed recently on hard courts after recovering from the coronavirus, with many tennis fans assuming it's preparation for the U.S. Open. But there's more evidence to Novak Djokovic's intentions, his scheduling intentions. Nadal, however, has moved the other way and has been filmed practicing exclusively only on clay, signaling his intention to skip the U.S. Open, although there's no confirmation on that yet. Nadal is still entered into the U.S. Open in case he decides he does want to play it. He's definitely going to wait till last minute. More on that in a moment. While Roger Federer will skip the U.S. Open due to injury. Djokovic initially had reservations on traveling to the U.S. with just one team member, but the entourage has now been upgraded to 3, which Djokovic can live with. But in a major development, which all but confirms the intention of Novak Djokovic to go for an 18th Grand Slam at the U.S. Open. Djokovic has ordered U.S. Open balls to be sent to his residence where he is practicing. That is pretty big news, actually. That signals that Novak Djokovic sees an opportunity at this, a lot of people have been talking about maybe the U.S. Open is going to be a stinker this year because there's not going to be any top players. You're not going to have Nadal, Federer, Djokovic. And then we all started thinking then, well, maybe somebody makes a move and says, I'm going to go to the U.S. Open because it's going to be easier to win it this year. So it looks like Djokovic is doing that. How will Rafa Nadal respond? Well, I know how he's going to respond. So what will Nadal do? Well, I see a few possibilities. One, just say skip the U.S. Open because what if you get injured? What if you catch the coronavirus while you're in the U.S., in New York City? Why is it worth it? Stay in Europe. Just be ready. You know the safest bet if you're the Rafa Nadal is to win the French Open. They cancel Madrid. Who cares? It's all about the French Open for Rafa no matter what. That could be one way to look at it. But another way to look at it is you see Djokovic going for the U.S. Open without Roger there and no Nadal there. I mean, obviously, you got some other players who could be a challenge, but Rafa could see it as only he, and I wouldn't blame him for thinking this way, only Rafa could stop Djokovic from getting closer to his slam count. Why not go there? And what would be the big problem? If now that they've canceled Madrid, Rafa would have a little time to get back on clay and get ready for the French Open. Maybe he could try to take all of that on. But what it's going to come down to is what Andy Murray talks about in this article here from Australia's New Daily. Quarantine uncertainty leaves tennis stars in limbo over the French Open. We talked about this a lot last month. This is a big question, and supposedly it's all going to be resolved pretty soon. We will find out. So, players need assurance that they would not face mandatory quarantine upon returning to Europe. As Patrick Mouratoglou said in something else I was reading earlier, not this article, he said, if you go to the U.S. Open and now Madrid is canceled, sure, you can come back and have a little time, but if you're forced to do a 2-week quarantine, that means you're not practicing. You're just sitting locked up in an apartment or something, waiting for the French Open with no practice, and then you start playing as soon as you're out of quarantine, because I think it's exactly 2 weeks after the U.S. Open. So that won't work. Definitely not for Rafa. I mean, that won't work for most players, as Andy Murray points out here. Mandatory quarantine would rule out players' participation in other ATP and WTA clay court events scheduled in Europe before the French Open from the end of September. The two major clay court events in the lead up to Roland Garros are in Madrid from September 13th to 20th and Rome from September 20th to 27th. And then the French Open, I believe, does start on September 27th or maybe a couple days after that, but it's very close to that. And obviously, Madrid is not going to happen anymore. So basically, Rome, September 20th. And who knows? We just read that thing earlier saying they're not going to have fans anymore. Maybe they will go ahead and cancel Rome. We don't know. That's why I'm saying earlier, what is the safer bet? Where do you feel like it is more likely to happen? I think with the bubble system and seeing what's happening with the NBA, you can be pretty sure that the U.S. Open will happen. Will the French Open happen? We're not sure. We'll talk about that a little bit later. While Spain does not require mandatory quarantine, Italy would need travelers to quarantine for 14 days if you're coming from the U.S. Well, that means you can't play. Because if you're Rafa, you're Novak, let's say they face off 1 versus 2 in the final of the U.S. Open, then you come back to Europe immediately, you do a 2-week quarantine. By the end of that, Rome is done, and now you go straight to the French Open. So that doesn't work. However, the USTA has said the organizers are working with relevant authorities in both, I would imagine, Italy and Spain, relevant authorities to resolve the issues. I would say they would have to be working with the French Tennis Federation as well. Quote from Andy Murray, Sir Andy Murray, that is. My understanding is that it would be sorted before we go to America, but things can change in the next 10 to 12 days. This is very fluid. Hopefully before we leave, the players will have assurances that when they come back from America, they won't have to quarantine for 2 weeks. If that is the case, and if you do well in the U.S. Open, you can't just arrive on the Sunday before the French Open starts on the Monday. That's not going to work. And he's got a great point there. That's not going to work for any players, whether you're Rafa Nadal playing for all the history in the record books, or you're ranked 100 in the world. It's not a good strategy. The 33-year-old said he's willing to take the risk to travel as he missed playing in big events. The situation I've been in the last few years, I've not had the opportunity to play in many slams. I don't know how many I'll have left. Totally makes sense. I agree with Andy Murray. He needs to get out there. Plus, you better believe Andy Murray thinks if Rafa and Djokovic don't play, there is a tiny chance he could somehow win the U.S. Open. Maybe. I mean, he's got to think it's a possibility. So moving on, let's get back to this idea, because to me, this is really what it comes down to for Djokovic and Nadal. And like I said earlier, exhibitions are great, but we like to watch tennis tournaments where there's more on the line, and no one has more on the line than the big three. They are playing for the biggest piece of tennis history, the GOAT. I mean, it doesn't get better than that. That's why we love it. So let's talk about what is their big decision, and that would have to be what is the safer bet. For Nadal, obviously, the French Open is always the safer bet because he's the king of clay. But we never know what's going to happen. Madrid, it's gone. We were told Madrid was going to happen. Now it's canceled. We were told Rome was going to have limited seating for fans. Now there's no fans. Maybe Rome will get canceled. And what about the French Open? Well, I haven't been keeping up with coronavirus in France. I keep up with it here in the U.S., at least I usually do. Sometimes you get depressed by all the devastating news you read and you kind of tune out for a couple days. But I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to search France coronavirus, see what the latest news is. Well, what is one of the first things that pop up? TheHill.com. France orders mask usage outdoors. Officials in several parts of France on Monday will begin requiring outdoor mask usage as a precaution against the spread of coronavirus. France, which ordered a nationwide lockdown for about 2 months earlier this year, has seen an uptick in confirmed infections from COVID-19 in recent weeks, with 7,000 new cases in the last week alone. The country has confirmed over 30,000 deaths from the virus since the pandemic began. So, right there, you can see. What did that other story say? Why did they cancel Madrid? Well, because in Spain, there's a lot of new cases popping up. Well, we just saw a story that said in the last week, what was the number? Over 3,000 cases? Now, I'm not saying that the French Open is going to get canceled, but I am saying you can't be sure. So if you're Nadal, you got to look at it like this. If I skip the U.S. Open so I can focus on the clay season, and they've already canceled Madrid, maybe they cancel Rome. Who cares if they cancel Rome? Nadal just wants to get on that French Open clay. What if they cancel the French Open? So now I'm Rafa Nadal sitting with 19 majors, and I just had a chance to go play the U.S. Open with a limited field, and I didn't go. So I'm stuck at 19, and I got nothing. I didn't even get a chance to try. So if you're Nadal, you have to seriously consider going to the U.S. Open now. And like I said before, it's all going to come down to what Andy Murray said. We got to wait and see. Can you guarantee me that if I go play the U.S. Open, I can come back to Europe and not have to do a 2-week quarantine? I'm sure they're going to have some kind of system where, if you test negative for COVID in the U.S. and then you fly here to Europe and you take another test and you're still negative COVID-19, we will let you play with no quarantine. I'm sure that will be the deal. When we get confirmation on that, I think there's a real chance we see Rafa and Djokovic go to the U.S. Open, which is going to make it huge. It's going to be must-see TV. We've already seen confirmation that Djokovic is going to play singles and doubles at the Cincinnati Masters 1000, which is in the U.S. Open because of the bubble system this year. They moved it out of Cincinnati. So there you go. That's that. Do comment below. Also below, you will see a link for the Coffee Break Tennis newsletter as Real Tennis starts coming back. There will be a lot of news to talk, so don't miss a thing. Don't miss an update on when we're going to have a show or any big news that you might have missed in the tennis world when things get rolling again. Click the link down below and make sure you sign up for the Coffee Break Tennis newsletter. We got one more story. Like I said, do comment below what you think, because I'm very curious. To me, there is a chance the French Open gets canceled. We're not going to say it's guaranteed, but Rafa has to think about that, and then you leave a U.S. Open on the table. I mean, even Sasha Zverev is saying he might not play. Like, a lot of talent will not be there. It's not just Roger Federer. Ash Barty's not going to be there. And then, of course, last thing we'll do, and then we'll get out of here, Nick Kyrgios will not be there. Last word on tennis.com. They can be a little exhausting sometimes with their articles. I think they go a little too hard for my taste on some of this stuff. But I thought they did a decent job talking about Nick Kyrgios and his announcement, which did feel quite canned. I mean, Nick Kyrgios was reading off of a script, like one of his sponsors wrote for him what he was. It's very un-Nick Kyrgios-like. Of course, he did insult everyone. That was Kyrgios-like. So this article from Last Word on Tennis.com says, Nick Kyrgios is tennis's biggest hypocrite. And maybe, I've got kind of exhausted with Nick Kyrgios lately. If he was playing tennis, if we had more going on, I'd be more interested. But with nothing from the tennis world besides Nick Kyrgios insulting Boris Becker or whatever the heck happened in the last month, it's kind of a snooze. So here's the first quote. They take quotes from the announcement that Kyrgios made, I believe it was today or yesterday. And number one quote here is, let's take a moment to remember what's important, health and safety as a community. Well, from there, lastwordontennis.com says that Nick Kyrgios was very, very critical of Novak Djokovic going to the nightclub. Of course, we were critical of it here too. I mean, not necessarily critical. It was just hilarious and seemed like quite an unforced error. So we talked about it a lot. So did Nick Kyrgios. But Nick Kyrgios recently was spotted in a nightclub. And maybe he wasn't dancing on tables or doing this horrible rendition of The Worm. But he was giving people hugs, and he was not wearing a mask indoors, as we have covered before on the show. When you're indoors, you're more likely to catch the coronavirus. He even tried to justify this, being hugging people without a mask at a nightclub, on Twitter by saying, "Bro, we have 0 issues. We have 0 cases here in Canberra. I followed every rule. I did as every citizen that lives with me in the ACT, mate. Maybe do some research, you pelican." I mean, I do still enjoy the names that he comes up with. Yes, he's talking to a tennis fan here, calling them a pelican. Yeah, well, Last Word on Tennis doesn't like that. We're okay with calling people pelicans here at Coffee Break Tennis. Seems like there's a lot worse you could say. All-American Team Cup in Georgia, an exhibition held by fellow American John Isner. I was there. Look at the big man move. From my seat, I gotta say, I like the social distance tournament. I had to see what it was like. You have your mask on. When you sit down, you're spaced out. No one's sitting near you except for whoever you come with, assuming it's friends and family that you're already around close enough to not worry about them. Plus, when you're out, it was like 80% humidity and like 90 degrees. It was miserable. But I like it. I enjoy having all that space, not having people sitting right next to you. It was pretty fun. Anyways, they go to point out here that since Kyrgios is part of the Laver Cup, and so is Isner, Kyrgios didn't criticize, and Francis Tiafoe caught coronavirus, COVID-19 at the thing here in Georgia, which no one really seemed to care too much. Looks like you got to be a big name like Djokovic to get a big story out of that. Another big quote that Nick Kyrgios used in his scorched earth tactic here was money grabbing your way around Europe, mate, trying to make a quick buck hosting exhibitions. It's just so selfish. It's just like so selfish, mate. Another absolute gem from the 0-time Grand Slam and Masters champion. And I saw Ben Roethlisberger said on Twitter that this doesn't really hold water for him because the fact that Nick Kyrgios hasn't won anything isn't really relevant to this argument. I agree with Ben Roethlisberger's there, but still, it's always fun to watch somebody insult somebody else. Another absolute gem from the 0-time Grand Slam and Masters champion. To clear this up, Adria Tour was created to raise money for charity. No players were making a profit out of the event. Instead, Nick Kyrgios has become one of the main poster boys for Laver Cup, an exhibition where players are paid huge I don't have a problem with Laver Cup is the only exhibition that I really am excited to watch. Unless I'm there in person, I'm excited to see high-level tennis in person. I like watching on TV too, of course, but Laver Cup is really the most exciting exhibition of all time. So I have no issues with the Laver Cup, but I see what the point is here. And then finally, this quote, "I'm sitting out for my Aussies, mate, and the hundreds of thousands of Americans who've lost their lives." Last Word on Tennis goes on to say, this comment here is pretty petty. It suggests that those who do end up playing the U.S. Open aren't putting those in their home countries before themselves, nor the dead Americans, which makes no sense whatsoever. But then it's Nick Kyrgios. The only thing that makes sense with him is that nothing makes sense. How someone has gotten away with doing and saying so much unsportsmanlike stuff, of course, they referred to in this article earlier, the Stanislav, the Manislav Wawrinka a thing that happened with his girlfriend at the time, and Nick Kyrgios saying something rude about it. Someone who's saying so much unsportsmanlike stuff over the years is truly amazing. I would say enough is enough, but honest truth is that was the case years ago. Hopefully one day it all stops, and if he is to get attention, Nick Kyrgios, it's down to results and not attention-seeking habits. Well, don't hold your breath. Last Word on Tennis blog. All right, hit the music. That is all the time we have for you today on Coffee Break Tennis. I think Nick Kyrgios with reading the stiff corporate announcement about why he's not playing the U.S. Open and insulting everyone else. I think lastwordontennis.com was right when they say that. It kind of implies everyone who is going to play the U.S. Open, forget about whether or not they need it financially, is a bad person. And I don't really like that from Nick Kyrgios. Last thing here, this is from Mr. Goat. He happened to stumble across this article from thedailybeast.com. Drug smuggling cat escapes high-security Sri Lankan prison. For some reason, Mr. Goat thinks this is a heck of a story and thought you would like it. A cat that was detained at Sri Lanka's high-security Welikada prison on suspicion of smuggling drugs to inmates has escaped, According to local media reports, the feline delinquent was detained last week with 2 grams of heroin, 2 SIM cards, and a memory chip hidden in a plastic bag tied to the collar on the prison grounds. And it also did mention that after escaping, the authorities decided it wasn't worth pursuing, going for a manhunt, a cat hunt, if you will, a cat hunt for the drug smuggling cat. They thought they would just let him roam the earth freely. And Mr. Goat does support that. We will be back next week, or at the very least, we'll do a Roger Federer's birthday bash if it looks like there is no developing news. And be ready, folks. Buckle up your seatbelts, because there will be a U.S. Open. There will be a lot of coffee break tennis coming, forthcoming.